So, Roger Moorhouse, this book is for lovers of understanding evil.
Mm.
That's not very grammatical.
Yeah.
Anyway, the book is Inside the Nazi Mind by
Yes,
Lawrence
The Nazi
Rees.
Mind, Lawrence Rees. Now, Lawrence Rees has, done great work with documentary making over the years, and then writing a lot of books about Nazi Germany. He's got a tremendous personal archive, done lots of interviews with Germans of that generation over the years. So this is another product of that amassing of information. And what he does with the Nazi Mind is to look at or try and answer the question, how that generation of ordinary Germans effectively fell for the Nazi mythology, the Nazi ideology, the whole kit and caboodle of Nazism and Hitlerism.
And this is the central question that all of you historians who grapple with Nazi Germany, I mean, that's the question you all oscillate around, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose it is, actually, because it is so abhorrent. I mean, obviously with the benefit of hindsight and all the rest of it. But the signs are all there. Hitler didn't really make much of a secret of particularly of his anti-Semitism. It's, core tenet of his worldview and all the rest of it. So
what do they call it nowadays? It's a feature, not a bug.
Exactly. It was. But I think that's part of the explanation, is that, certainly for those Germans voting for Hitler in the last elections of 32 and 33, made the opposite assumption. They assumed that, they voted for him in spite of the anti-Semitism, not because of it. They thought that was just sort of an ideological excess that would be straightened out by a period of power.
Yeah.
Most of them anyway. So, there are some very ordinary and very human reasons why the Nazis come to power. But I suppose what Rees is looking into more is, the creation of the Hitler myth and how people buy into that and how people buy into the ideology and why. So there's a big strand of sort of psychohistory there that he plays with, and he does it very well, and he backs it up with a lot of that material, that first-hand material, as I said, that he's gleaned over the years. So it does actually give you, it works actually as a sort of narrative history of the Third Reich, to be fair, but it also gives you that insight into in a sense why people and how people came to support the Nazis.
I think one of the only caveat we both had when we read it, which we read it towards the beginning of the year, was that Rees maybe was trying to make too many modern parallels and bash us over the head with those, which we found a little distracting, because actually the core of what he was doing was so interesting.
Yes, I agree.
And the modern parallels are there if you want to make them, but we were sort of being a bit bludgeoned by them.
Yeah, it was. I think he kind of tops and tails it with that, to be fair. So, I think what's in between is really, really good and solid history and very, very enlightening. The top and tailing, that's sort of modern reference. I mean, I always find that a little bit clumsy anyway. That sort of, history written with one eye on the present is never brilliant history. It's never a brilliant analysis of the present either, incidentally.
No.
And I think, he's nodding in that direction.
But pulls back enough.
But I think he pulls back enough that it stands on its own as a really good examination of how a generation of Germans were seduced and the processes that achieved that.
And people still are. I mean, what has been really fascinating. So we've been doing this podcast on YouTube and on podcasts for some time now, and
that was spectacularly vague, can I just say?
Yes, it's May. Okay, whatever. And anything we do about the Nazis does better than everything else.
Well, yeah.
And we don't want to just do the Nazis, but
no, I mean we could.
We could. You're in not the top Nazi story. But if we were just chasing the kind of clicks or whatever, literally,
the Nazis is where it's at.
The Nazis, and that's insane.
It is insane,
especially given that actually, weirdly, what we also discovered as complete newbies to all the tech and all of the rest of it is that you kind of can get penalised on the sites for
using the words Nazi, Hitler.
Exactly. So you're in this bizarre position that some of the most sought after content on some of these sites for whatever reason is about Nazis
Is
and
about
Hitler or
the man
whatever.
with the
And they call
moustache.
it, and everybody on social media calls him the man with the moustache to
Yeah.
get around the algorithms.
Yeah.
So the continuing dark fascination with
Yeah.
them, which isn't really what this book is about, but I would also be I would read a book about why Nazi fascination lingers
Yeah.
on into the 21st century in the way that it does, and why Nazis are still, I mean, for want of a better word, box office.
Yeah.
I mean, it is extraordinary.
It is extraordinary, and they genuinely still are. So, well, I mean, this gives us an insight into, you know, the historic question, at least, of you know, how they get to where they get to, and so on, and seduce a nation,
and seduce a literate, brilliant,
exactly, and that's the key thing,
educated
right?
nation.
I mean, you can make that parallel that there are other regimes that seduce, you know, less sophisticated societies, but you know, Germany is a sophisticated society at this point, and that's what I think, you know, to me always sort of sets the Nazi story apart, is that it is a sophisticated, educated, you know, supposedly enlightened society, and yet it gets seduced to, you know, absolute evil.
Yeah, extraordinary. So
there we are.
Top Christmas present for the, you know, lovers.
For the lover of, the lover of understanding evil, we said, didn't we, for this one?
Yeah, because, you know, a lot of the other stuff we toyed with was quite dark.
Yeah, yeah.
So, lovers of understanding evil.
The Nazi Mind, Lawrence Rees, really, really good book.